2025 Mets season will be remembered for all the wrong reasons, sadly. A $340 million payroll, sky-high expectations, and in the end, no October baseball. Now the question begins, what went wrong? Who stays? Who goes? And how does this team get back to being a contender in 2026? Joining me to break it all down is the host of the Subway to Shea podcast, my guy, Anthony Rivera. Anthony, what's going on, man?
Healing a little bit from these wounds of this Mets season, this slow burn that just like kept driving a stake into your back. It was just so rough and so long, and a little bit glad that the season's kind of over. I wish they made it to the postseason, but man, this just wasn't it this year. That's for sure.
You used the same term I said to Tyreek Butler of ESPN Radio. I had him on with me for another discussion here on Straight Outta Flushing, and I said slow burn. That's exactly what it was. It was a slow burn for the Mets fan, and I'm not sure if that's worse than 2007 or better. I don't know. It's not good.
I'll say this. I was in the stands for the 2023 season that was kind of out of hand already by the trade deadline, and this is worse than that to me. And that team had no chance.
You know what? Sometimes you just rather know it's over quickly. I can understand that. You just rather know that. All right, let's get into it, because David Stearns, Carlos Mendoza, they are under the microscope after this collapse, undoubtedly. How hot is their seat heading into 2026?
I'm going to say that David Stern's seat is safe for now, and that's because Steve Cohen, for years, was trying to pry away David Stearns from the Milwaukee Brewers, and he finally gets them after 2 years. I don't think he goes anywhere. Maybe after next offseason, if we don't make it to the postseason again, maybe you can start looking into David Stearns, but I think his seat is safe for now. Now, that does not absolve him from the issues and the failure that this team went through, and it just trickles down all the way to Carlos Mendoza. Unfortunately for him, he has to deal with, the roster that's been given to him, but I think Carlos Mendoza is more on the hot seat right now. I think I read that Andy Martino of SNY said that he is safe, but this is the final year of his contract, and if they don't get off to a hot start, I mean, look at what we saw what happened to Willie Randolph in 2007. This could be something similar if they do not get going right off the start in 2026.
Yeah, we could see that because expectations are sky high. Andy Martino of SNY did report exactly what you said. And, I think after a season like this, Anthony, a lot of times you're going to hear words, okay, how do we describe this? And failure is the word you're going to hear a lot in terms of this team. We've heard a lot of talk about this being the most expensive failure in baseball. Do you think that's a fair label for this Mets season?
I guess so. I feel like there's been more failures like 2007 where they had I think seven game lead with 17 to play. I think that's the worst collapse that the Mets have had, but this is probably second for me, considering the payroll that they had. But a lot of this team was not put together by David Stearns. Francisco Lindor was signed in 2021. They signed Brandon Nimmo after the 2022 season, if I'm correct. And those are big contracts that you have right now. You add Juan Soto, which adds a lot of money, but to me, this has just been, like you said, a failure. Is it the most expensive failure? Probably on paper it is, but I don't know. I feel like there's been worse than this.
No, it's tough. It's tough. 07 that's just tough. I think because how rapid it was. 7 games, 17 to go. This, as we said, much more of a slow burn here for the Mets. Well, let's look at where this team fell short and where can they improve. So let's start with the lineup. Where did this team fall shortest offensively? And in your eyes, what needs to change for them offensively next season?
I think where it falls short, one, is with runners in scoring position. If you see the stats on paper, the Mets are, middle of the pack, a little bit towards the top echelon when it comes to offense. But when it comes to scoring with runners in scoring position and getting those big hits, they really could not come through probably for the entire season. They had a good 3-week span in August, and even that, they went 11-17 because the pitching was so bad. So they need to figure a better philosophy and a better way to attack at the plate which they've struggled with attacking fastballs and going after pitches outside of the strike zone, has been a huge struggle for this entire team. And then they have to really decide here, because this was the year that the Mets said, you know what, we're not going to go with the veteran presence on the bench with Jose Iglesias and JD Martinez. And I know Jesse Winker was there and got hurt, but this was the year they were like, you know what, we are going to finally give the kids their opportunity. And for the most part of the season, it didn't work out. And most of that failure to me falls on Mark Vientos. And you and me have talked about this during the offseason. I said Mark Vientos is a prime candidate for a sophomore slump. And we saw that clear as day during this season. You had Francisco Alvarez dealing with a lot of injuries, but he's not been that guy that he was in 2023 when he hit over 20 home runs. Brett Baty kind of turned the season around, got hurt the last couple of days. But, you know, even him, it was a long time for him to get going. And Ronnie Mauricio was basically a no-show. He probably should not have been there. He probably have gone to AAA, played a little more, and healed a little more down there. But I think even I heard Gary Cohen to say his mind wasn't in it after being, you know, sat for about like 4 or 5 weeks. He really wasn't into the game.
Yeah, and he wasn't getting the everyday playing time. But you know what? It's a great point that you make. The young guys definitely didn't pan out in the way I think Mets fans thought they would. You were right on it. You said this with me in the offseason about Vientos, and he definitely had that sophomore slump. And now the Mets have some decisions to make about what they're going to do with the young guys. Where is Vientos going to play? Beatty looks like he should be a third baseman. He finally has come around.
Yeah.
But what do you do with Vientos? Alvarez, what's his situation? Is he the answer at catcher? A lot of questions. The big question, I think, for Mets fans going forward is Pete Alonso. He opt out. He said that he's going to opt out. He said that after game 162. How should the Mets approach Pete Alonso as a free agent here this time? Is it pay him at all costs, or is there actually an argument to let him walk, which I know some fans are going to say, Anthony, it's crazy. You cannot let your all-time franchise leader in home runs walk out the door, especially when he just set the record this past year. But how do you think the Mets should approach this? Because right now, Pete Alonso seems like he's got all the leverage here.
He does. He has 100% of the leverage. If it's not for Pete Alonso, the first 2 months of the season and how clutch he was and how almost MVP-like he was, you know, this team is not even close to making it into the playoffs. We talked about runners in scoring position. He was probably the best player with runners in scoring position this year. He has his slumps. We know what he is. But the thing that wants me to bring him back is the fact that he can play in Queens. We don't get that many players that do that. And then how are you replacing Pete Alonso's production? Are you throwing Mark Vientos at first after the season that he had? You know, this team's already struggling to score runs. We saw Francisco Lindor as well as Juan Soto. Both of them struggled to score with runners in scoring position. And Brandon Nimmo hasn't really been the same, even though he hits for power and he overmatched his home runs as well as his RBIs. But in some big spots, he was unable to, bring in some important runs that we needed to win some games here. I find it really hard to let Pete Alonso go, not knowing where they're going to go from here. Are they going to go after a Kyle Schwarber, or is it, from within with Mark Vientos? Like, it's a tough decision to make, but this is something that David Stearns really needs to think about, because it's not like last year where they had the leverage. They don't have any leverage on Pete Alonso this offseason.
No, he doesn't. He knows it. His agent, Scott Boras, knows it, and they're going to work that leverage. I'm pretty sure it's going to be interesting to watch this offseason. Outside of Alonso, who from the lineup do you feel like has to be back in 2026? And who would you be willing to move on from? Who are you looking at and saying, okay, time's up, you got to get out of Flushing?
So obviously Francisco Lindor comes back, Juan Soto comes back, and I think, like you said, Brett Baty should be the third baseman. Guys that I would probably move on from, I think, Jesse Winker, I think just the back injury, that's just too much to have and to count on. I would definitely not bring back Cedric Mullins. He did not show up at all for this team. Jose Siri, goodbye, see you later. I would start thinking about trying to move on from Jeff McNeil as well. I don't think he provides enough offense for this team. If he's a lot of people have said if he's not batting over 300 and in that batting champion form that he was in 2022, what's the purpose of having him on the team? And I know this is really hard because I'm a fan of his, but and it's probably hard because of his contract. There should be some consideration of thinking about trading Brandon Nimmo if they can. Obviously, his contract is very expensive, and it's hard. But this is a guy that was signed to play center field. He gave us 1 year of that. They moved him to left field. He hasn't been great as a left fielder either. He doesn't have a great arm. It's taking him a long time to get to routes when the ball goes past him, and he's totally changed as a hitter. He's more a power hitter, more RBIs, and less of that guy that was getting on base. It's really hard to figure out where to put him in the lineup because he's not really a 4 guy. He's not really a 5 guy. He should be at the top of the lineup, but you got Lindor and Soto there, and I don't want to move him from that spot. So, it may be time to start thinking about if you can try to trade Brandon Nimmo, but I know it's going to be extremely hard to do so. But that's just my opinion.
One other guy for you in that lineup. Where are you on Alvarez? Where are you on him as a catcher? It's tough because he hasn't hit. He's had all these injuries too, and credit to him because he toughed it out down the stretch. No disrespect to that man at all. He absolutely toughed it out. But where are you on Francisco Alvarez right now as the Mets catcher going forward?
Because he's 23, 24 years old, I'm not going to give up on him just yet. Okay. I'm actually fine with the tandem that we have of him and Luis Torrens. If they're both healthy, I am good with those two guys as my catcher. That's one less thing to worry about. I want to see if he can have a bounce back season and stay healthy. I mean, a lot of him getting hit in the hand or sliding and hitting his hand on a base or getting stepped on, that's a lot of freakish stuff.
Yeah.
So I want to see if he can stay healthy and figure out a way to get his offense back, because we saw it, right? They sent him down. He comes back and he was the hottest hitter we had in August.
Yeah.
And then he gets hit in the hand again. And he got hit in the hand again in AAA when he was rehabbing. So, it's been a struggle for him. And he had the big hit in Chicago to kind of help save what was left of that part of the season. So I'm not giving up on Francisco Alvarez yet.
All right, so let's see there. Now, if you're going to send some guys out, if possible, or you're going to move on from some guys, there might be some bats you want to target. So which bat should David Stearns target this winter, either in free agency or via trade, to fix the inconsistency with runners in scoring position, knowing that's the biggest thing this offense needs to fix? So are there any bats out there you'd like to see the Mets go after?
Man, if they could prior away a Kyle Schwarber from Philadelphia, I think he's going to be a free agent after this year. If that's someone that they can get, whether it is to be DH or I don't know if they want to throw him at first base or something like that. I still need more time to assess what's coming at free agency. I haven't really looked into it as much as just knowing that Kyle Schwarber is one of the guys that is available. That's the type of guy that I would bring in here.
Another power bat to bring in there. Let's go to the pitching side. Kodai Senga. He'll be back fully next year, we hope. But do the Mets need to add a true number 1 to this rotation, or do they just need to add some more solid mid-rotation guys?
They need to add someone at the top of the rotation, no doubt. I don't want Kodai Senga being a number 2 or even a number 3. He's another guy that talk about someone to be willing to move on from. I think I'm willing to move on from Kodai Senga. There's just too much maintenance that he needs to get ready. You need to have a 6-man rotation around him. He's got to pitch every 6th day. That's just too much for this rotation to handle. And if David Stearns is not going to go after an ace, if he's not going to spend money and go after an ace, and he's going to do all this projects and reclamations, if he's going to do all that stuff, then there's really no point in having a guy like Kodai Senga, because we don't know if he's going to be able to stay healthy, for one, and all the things that come with him in maintaining whether it's his arm or what. I think he even said during his press conference he didn't feel right and all that. Like, we've gotten that for so long. We need a guy that's going to pitch at least 5 innings, and he's not one of those guys that can do that.
Yeah, it's tough because when he has pitched and been healthy, he's looked really good on the mound.
Yeah.
But then he has been healthy and hasn't been able to come back right. And I'm with you. I think the Mets need to go get a top of the rotation guy. I said this at the deadline. I thought they should have went after Sandy Alcantara from the Marlins. I thought that was a guy they should go after. It was
Yeah.
probably going to cost him a prospect or two, but look, he pitched in good form. Hey, Mets fans saw him in good form on Friday night. They saw exactly the form he was in on Friday night. So, yeah,
And
I
Edward
would go out.
Cabrera was another name that was being thrown around at the trade deadline, and he ended our season today.
Yeah, yeah, that adds a little bit more salt on the wound there for the Mets fan going on. But Mets fans were excited about something they saw down the stretch, and those were the young pitchers. So my question for you here is, Anthony, how much trust should be placed in the young pitchers? We're talking about Brandon Sproat, Jonah Tong, and Nolan McLean, who was really impressive down the stretch. How much trust should be put into those guys to contribute in 2026?
I don't want this to be like this season where they were labeled the saviors of the team to end the season. That it just wasn't fair to them. Um, and all the lumps that Jonah Tong had to take, I felt so bad for him. I think he needs to start in AAA and just get a little more season down there. I think Nolan McLean is ready for prime time. I think he's ready to go and he'll be a part of this rotation. A good solid number two to start the year, and maybe he becomes the ace down the line. I'm very interested to see a little bit more of Brandon Sproat. I think he pitched well when he could. And if it wasn't for bad defense behind him on Friday night, he could have probably stayed in the game a little bit longer. So those two guys, I'm very excited to see contribute a lot more. And Jonah Tong maybe gets a little more seasoning in AAA and maybe comes back halfway through the year.
Okay, that could be good. Not putting pressure on all the kids, but get a couple of them that can pitch at this level to start next season. That would be really good for this Mets team as they need some improvement in the starting rotation. Now, the bullpen, I'm just shaking my head because that was an adventure this year. We saw them struggle to close out games. We saw arms that they acquired not really do what they were supposed to. We're talking about Ryan Helsley. What kind of relief help do they need in 2026? And is this a place where you're looking at David Stearns as, okay, you got to spend big here. You got to go out and spend and get some arms here for this pen?
It's crazy because I thought that David Stearns did everything right at the trade deadline. I thought all those moves were perfect. Getting Helsley for the eighth inning, Tyler Rogers with his unique delivery, the sidearm delivery or underarm delivery, and then you add in Gregory Soto, which we needed another lefty. They brought back Brooks Raley, which I thought was a great move as well. And the three that they got at the trade deadline, they just didn't work out. And it was crazy. I mean, Tyler Rogers gave us a little bit more of what we needed, but Helsley was awful. Gregory Soto started off well and then fell apart. They really need to put a lot more emphasis on guys that can get the strikeout. You know, let Ryan Stanix go. Obviously, Reed Garrett is going to be out with Tommy John surgery, but they need guys that are going to throw more strikes than walks because this team gave up a lot of walks out of the bullpen. And guess what? Edwin Diaz is a free agent. You know, if you let Edwin Diaz go, this bullpen is very, very bad, very bad without Edwin Diaz. So they better figure out what they're going to do with Edwin Diaz first before they decide everybody else in the bullpen as well.
That's a great point. Edwin Diaz, who can opt out here, and he's another guy. He's got all the leverage as well, just like Pete Alonso. He's got all the leverage here in terms of those negotiations. Now, finally, Anthony, what would be your message to Mets fans? Like, what should Mets fans realistically expect from this team in 2026? Because I know we're going to hear it from the front office. They're going to want to bounce back. This is a disappointing year. That is an understatement here and all that stuff. But what should Mets fans realistically expect from this team? Because I asked this before in another conversation, which was the trust levels got to be down from the fan base right now. And I think that would be fair after what they saw from this year and the expectations that they were heading into 2025. So what should be realistic expectations for this team in 2026?
First off, I think that making the postseason last year may have been a little bit of a detriment. I wouldn't take that away for anything. But I think in David Stearns' eyes, it may have been a little bit of a detriment because it had to speed up what he was going to do. And I don't think he wanted to spend as much money as we did when it went to getting Juan Soto and Pete Alonso. Obviously, a lot of that stuff didn't work. And like you said, they gained a lot of trust last season getting to the sixth game of the NLCS. And now I feel like they've lost that, right? This is a team that in 20 years has made the postseason 4 times. Wait, 20. 2006, 2015, 16, 2022. Okay, 5 times, right? Out of 20 years. Also, in that 20 years, we've had 3 collapses. So I can understand the fans being upset with the way this season ended, especially with, even Carlos Mendoza and all the play. We have the talent. We have the talent. Well, the talent did not show up. You had all the talent in the world, and on the back of the baseball card, we thought you could make it to the postseason, and the fans came out in droves because Steve Cohen asked for it, and we did that. And this team disappointed. They failed. They were an absolute failure, and they collapsed. And I don't fault any fans for feeling upset about the way that this season ended and not being as excited right now for the 2026 season. I need to see more of what happens during the offseason and what David Stearns does. And I'll be honest with you, and I posted this on Twitter earlier today, I'm not 100% confident in what David Stearns is going to do this offseason after what we've seen this year. Getting Frankie Montas and a lot of the other mistakes that he's made. I'm not 100% confident that he's going to go all in and do what it takes to get back to the postseason and get back to the NLCS. So it's going to be a struggle. I always like to remain a cautious optimistic, and that's how I will do it every year moving forward. The last time the Mets burnt me was 2006, and I never believed 100% in a team ever since then.
I'm not laughing at you, Anthony. I'm just laughing at the pain of that.
Yeah, it's there.
But I think you bring up a great point, right? When you looked at it, and I think it was fair of you to look at the last 20 years of the Mets, and obviously they've made the playoffs 5 times. That is a fourth of the time. 25% of the time they've reached the playoffs. But to that point, when you look at what Steve Cohen has talked about, what David Stearns has talked about, they've talked about sustained success. And that's something they've wanted for this franchise. And in those 20 years that you just mentioned, the Mets have only made the playoffs in back-to-back years one time. And I think from what you gather from the fan base, they'd like to see a little bit more sustained success. And this is what this front office and ownership has talked about. But when you're coming off of 2024, and I do agree with you, that might have, maybe accelerated things a little bit faster than they wanted to, you're thinking, okay, 2025, we'll see some sustained success. And then going to 2026, however things ended up here, it feels like a step back. And that's the challenge for this front office and for the fan base and fans like you and content creators like you, Anthony, to get that trust back. They got to try to do that, and there's going to be a road to that this offseason. So we'll see if the Mets can do that as they try to build towards 2026. But this was a good conversation, my friend. We will see what the Mets do more in the offseason. I feel like you need to reset. I need to reset. The Mets fan base needs to reset. The Mets themselves need to reset. So we will see how all this goes down in the offseason. That is Anthony Rivera. Check him out on the Subway to Shea podcast. Does a fantastic job covering the Mets all season long. Anthony, I appreciate you, man, and we will talk after we reset. We will do that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dexter. Appreciate it.